You know, no matter who you are, you don't have to take it from the politicians. They work for you, you don't work for them, and you should hold them to account and don't presume they know more than you do, because the wonders of the internet allow you to do a lot of good and excellent research and make you pretty expert in areas of public policy if you put your nose to the grindstone. When we're talking about Benghazi the way we're talking about Benghazi is because we know there are mothers who are worried about their sons and daughters who are deployed overseas, and that they're kept safe, and that the American government is there to protect them if things go south. You know, and when you think about it, mothers and certainly parents generally, they want is safety for them, for themselves and their families. And whether you're talking about Benghazi, or securing our border, or challenging sanctuary cities as we're doing, we're challenging San Francisco over its sanctuary policies that led to the death of people like Kate Steinle. I mean, mothers want to be safe. They want their families to be safe, they want their children to be safe, and addressing the illegal immigration problem, addressing the national security problem is a question of the personal safety of Americans.
What advice would you have for President Trump?
You know, President Trump has coined this phrase for protecting our nation's borders with extreme vetting. And I would say his response to the big government and the deep state ought to be extreme transparency. And it should be, we're going to expose everything that went on during the Obama administration. We're going to stop the obstruction. We're going to let it all hang out with respect to what the Trump administration is doing. And so we should hear more about the IRS. Let's get all the documents. We're still fighting about documents. Let's get all the documents about Benghazi. Let's get all the documents about Hillary Clinton's emails that we're still getting massive obstruction from the various agencies. And by the way, release the information you can release on Obama's spying on the Trump team and what it is that was going on, who was involved in it, what was leaked, who had opportunities to leak it. Let's get the disclosures so that American people can hold those people accountable, and frankly the Justice Department can hold those people accountable. And the way to do that is to let it all hang out, extreme transparency. And I know it's tough for administrations to do this. You know, the typical Republican response under the Freedom of Information Act is, well, no one's allowed to ask us any questions, and we don't have to tell anybody anything. And I don't think President Trump should follow that establishment advice. He should take the populist point of view that the American people, it's their government, and this government needs to be accountable to them, and these agencies need to tell the American people what they're up to. And I'm going to tell the agencies, when people ask you for documents, if there's no good reason for withholding the information, give it to them, and give it to them quickly. I mean, right now, for instance, you know, the Trump administration, because it's largely being run by the Obama administration, is telling us we have to wait years to get all of Hillary Clinton's emails. Frankly, we should just be waiting for a few months for them to get their act together.
From taking an assessment of where we are in 2017, what are the biggest scandals that Judicial Watch is most focused on right now?
Well, the big scandal of the moment is not the Russia scandal, but the Obama spying scandal. Because the whole Russia thing is a lot of distraction, and we kind of know what the outlines of it are, and I don't know what else we're expected to learn other than the Russians may have had an interest in the outcome of the election. We don't know what that interest was. They may have thought Hillary was going to win, and they were trying to make her life miserable. But there's been no evidence there was any collusion like the left likes to fantasize about between the Trump campaign and the Russians. But there is evidence that the Trump team was spied upon by the Obama administration using this Russia connection, which was really weak, as a pretext. And then the results of that spying program, assuming it was for good purposes, the results were classified, were leaked. Another crime. So there were a lot of crimes committed associated at least with the leaking and the so-called unmasking of some of these names potentially. We know the leaking was illegal. The unmasking may have been legally problematic as well, where Americans were caught up in this intelligence gathering and their names were made public or unmasked even bureaucratically. You know, that could be a crime if it was done improperly. But certainly the leaking of any names, the leaking of this classified material is pretty serious. And was it Republicans who leaked it? I doubt it. You know, I suspect it was the Obama gang that did it, people close to President Obama, or Hillary Clinton, or both. And that's where the criminal investigation needs to be. I really don't trust Congress to get to the bottom of this, because they're constrained as to what they can say, because it's largely the intelligence committees doing the investigations. So you don't know what they have and what they don't have. This is why we're using the Freedom of Information Act process, the FOIA process, to ask for the documents, go to court to get them if necessary, so the American people can know what was up. Well, the other big scandal, for which there still needs to be accountability, is the Obama IRS scandal. And when people say, well, why would you think President Obama would misuse our intelligence agencies to go after his domestic opponents or an incoming president? Well, look at the IRS, where you had the IRS suppress an entire political movement against that President Obama thought was against him back in 2012. It helped his reelection. It made the Tea Party irrelevant during the 2012 election campaign. And it was the IRS that was doing that. But not only was the IRS doing it, but you had the Department of Justice and the FBI involved, because Judicial Watch found through its FOIA request and litigation that the IRS was collaborating with the Justice Department under President Obama and the FBI under President Obama to come up ways to jail the very groups, the leaders of the very groups that they were suppressing at the IRS. So when you've got the Justice Department and the FBI targeting for prosecution the president's political opposition, why would it be a surprise that the same Justice Department and FBI would use their counterintelligence powers inappropriately as well? Well, you have the general crisis of immigration. You know, there's this lawlessness throughout the land where you have these sanctuary cities thwarting federal immigration law, really aiding and abetting illegal activity by helping illegal aliens remain in the country contrary to law. And sometimes they are helping the worst of these illegal aliens, the real hardened criminal class in the illegal alien community, those who've committed crimes against persons like rape, murder, DUIs, you name it, assault, robbery. Those people are getting special benefits and protections from these sanctuary cities because they hate President Trump and they want open borders. And of course we have this crisis on the border that is still largely unpoliced, and the president has done remarkable things in terms of just setting a different tone and reinvigorating the Border Patrol and sending a signal to illegal aliens that you may not want to cross the border because you're not going to be welcome. The lawlessness won't be welcome anymore. But still the border is largely undermanned and open, and so there's got to be more significant resources put to bear there, because it really is a national security crisis. You've got the drug cartels operating freely. They don't necessarily need illegal aliens to get their work done. They're happy to get through the border in other means. And then you have the national security component, where we know from Judicial Watch's prior reporting that they've got this ugly cartel jihadist link at the border that allows these Islamic terrorists to operate much more freely than you might think, and in a way that you would be frightening to most people on the border.
And Tom, if you were going to drain the swamp, what would that mean to you? What should it mean to President Trump?
Look, we're always going to have corruption in government. But when you've got big government, you're going to have really big corruption. And the best approach that President Trump can take is to really pare back these government agencies. In fact, eliminate some of them as well. Because that's where you're going to really see benefits to the American people in terms of getting the government back under control and accountable. And the more government money that's spent, the more efforts the bad guys will take to make sure they get a piece of it. I mean, you can't spend $4 trillion plus and expect people not to try to get dibs on it. And some people will do that improperly. And so you're really putting out there this temptation for the worst of the worst in Washington when you have the government doing as much as it is. And so you got to start eliminating government agencies. You've got to get the government out of the private sector, because when the government comes into the private sector, that's when politicians try to extort favors, and those affected by the regulations do their darndest to affect how government is done, and they sometimes do it illegally. So, to clean house, you got to really get your house in order and make it smaller. And, we just uncovered how George Soros's operation, he's a billionaire many times over, was getting $4 or $5 million from USAID under President Obama. So I think taxpayers, who both the left and right, might be surprised to learn that billionaires like George Soros is getting money to do dubious work as it is, but getting money at all from the American taxpayer, because he don't need it. And we had other instances during the Obama administration of allied groups getting direct government money. And conservatives really don't play that game because we don't like the idea of government money funding political advocacy or public policy advocacy like that. But the left relies on it. And that would be an essential thing for President Trump to do, which is to order his agencies to turn off the spigot of taxpayer money that flows from the put upon federal taxpayers to left-wing interest groups. Getting legislation passed is relatively easy in Washington. I mean, it's never what you want it to be from a conservative perspective, but we know things are going to get done in terms of taxes and health care and regulation cutbacks and things like that. But this anti-corruption effort, that's politically difficult. And policing the agencies, making sure the civil service is accountable to the people and not a law unto itself, addressing these core corruption issues, maybe even term limits, things like that. That's where this president can establish a wonderful legacy by spending his political capital on combating corruption in Washington and getting this darn government back under control and accountable to the American people and accountable to the rule of law. As much as if he spent as much time doing that or more time doing that than even getting legislation passed, that would be a legacy for the ages.
So say hope springs eternal and you got everything you wanted as far as secrets that are being kept secret right now. I know you're someone very interested in Benghazi. Why is it important to get to the bottom of Benghazi or other things that you're looking for answers for?
With Benghazi, there's got to be accountability, not only because it's the right thing to do when your government officials abandon those under fire in the field or don't rush to help them, but we got to reassure our military and deployed civilian personnel overseas that, yeah, we take the commitment that we won't abandon you when things hit the fan seriously. And so it's not just about the victims, the 4 victims of Benghazi and the many injured, but it's also about the family members of those who have deployed personnel overseas now, in the military and in civilian agencies like the State Department and CIA and FBI, you name it. All of these agencies got people overseas. And the Benghazi lies are so serious in that regard because you had a president and his top staff willing to lie about a terrorist attack in order to keep themselves in office. And not only that, they refused to run to the fire to protect our people because they were concerned about the politics. We can't let our military folks think that's the new rule in Washington. And we're not going to give up on this issue.
And Trey Gowdy, did he work with Judicial Watch, or how would you grade him for their work?
Well, the irony is that the House Select Committee on Benghazi was created in response to a Judicial Watch disclosure. We found this document showing the White House was behind the Benghazi lies. John Boehner got upset that it was Judicial Watch and not his congressional committees who he said could do all the work. They didn't get it. So he said, enough of this, we're going to have a select committee. And the select committee, in my view, they always get information that's sometimes helpful, but they would have been much more useful if they did more hearings and more investigations. A lot of their work was behind the scenes, and they really didn't want to bring public attention, or they avoided bringing public attention to this very key issue that I'm talking about on Benghazi.
No one lost their job.
No one lost their job. I mean, Susan Rice is still out there. I mean, she was, that's another issue. Americans should realize these scandals usually tie together. On Benghazi, you had Susan Rice doing the lying. She's also implicated in the Trump spying scandal. So it's no coincidence that when you've got unethical government officials who aren't held to account, they go on to violate the public trust in other ways.
So grade the Republicans and the Democrats in Congress on your agenda.
Congress doesn't want to do any investigations. And when they do, it's for political purposes. Republicans don't like doing investigations because any more than they like, for instance, government shutdowns. Controversy is something that the Republican leadership generally tries to avoid, so investigations are usually half-hearted or they're dragged kicking and screaming into doing them to begin with. Now, Democrats are going to want to use the powers of Congress to police President Trump, obviously, in a way they weren't interested in doing it with President Obama. But you understand that's the way politics is. So in those circumstances, Congress isn't going to take a leadership role one way or another in terms of holding the government to account. They're set up to spend money. They're not set up to investigate how the money's spent or to police and hold accountable corrupt government officials. And that's why Judicial Watch has had such success, because we're set up to do that. We use this Freedom of Information Act law that allows us to get into court and demand records and get them. And because we're able to get records that even Congress can't get, in many ways, Congress has deferred to Judicial Watch in terms of, well, we'll let Judicial Watch do it because we really don't know how to do it anyway.
Looking at the last year, what are you most proud of for Judicial Watch's accomplishments?
Well, the most significant impact we've had was highlighting for the American people and getting accountability over the Clinton email scandal. You know, Hillary Clinton created her own scandal. The scandal was worsened by the Obama administration's obstruction and delay in the release of materials. You know, we really impacted history last year and in 2015. We didn't do it because we were aiming to affect the outcome of an election. But, you know, the consequences were very real for Hillary Clinton. And frankly, you know, she got away criminally with what she did initially. And I think the next step is whether or not the Trump administration is going to follow through and actually do an independent, serious criminal investigation of Hillary Clinton. Because it was clear the Obama Justice Department wasn't doing it, and Mr. Comey's FBI wasn't doing it as well. And so I think this new Justice Department needs to take a new look at where they stand with respect to all the Clinton criminality that's been uncovered yet uninvestigated in a serious way.
What will readers find most surprising in your book?
I think they're going to be surprised about the extent of the lies about the Obama IRS scandal. They're also going to be surprised, maybe not surprised, but shocked to the extent that Hillary Clinton was warned not to do what she did, but she did it anyway with respect to her emails. And we document that all in the book.